Thanks. Okay, so my name's Susan Hayward, and I'm the General Editor of Studies in French Cinema. I'm also the founder of this journal, and I'm going to talk about several aspects to the journal. But first of all, I want to begin by saying that I have known Masoud for a very long time. Before that, I knew of him through Keith Cameron. We're going back a very, very long time. And one of the things that I always felt about Masoud and was very struck by was his absolute integrity, and that he had a very profound ethical basis for his publishing adventures. So he was, somebody that was tempting to work with anyway. I'd also like to endorse the story about Routledge, because before I talked to Robin Beecroft, who was then with you, when I had the idea for this journal back in 1999, I had been publishing with Routledge quite a lot on various book projects. And so they think, Rebecca Barden was a friend, so I went to her and said, I've got this fabulous idea for a journal, are you interested? And she pretty much said, no, it'll never work, she said. Don't say that to me, I'm a very determined woman. So I thought, well, it will work. And I immediately thought of Intellect Press, because by then you'd moved to Bristol, I think, but or just about 1999, I think you had moved. But I contacted you and was put in touch with Robin, and that's how we built the story that became, I think, one of your quite successful film studies journals. We do seem to be doing very well, and I'm really proud of our product, and certainly would endorse what Masoud has said about the way he works in partnership with you, or his colleagues with you, on everything. And it is a negotiating thing. Slightly to the side, I've just completed writing a book on French costume drama of the 1950s, and it was sent out to a reader who suggested that I completely reorder the way in which I'd done it. Now, I could have said, well, I'm not going to bother to do that. I'm a well-established author, blah, 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 be really, prompty about it. And I thought, no, this person has spent so much time thinking about this book and giving a really fabulous reader's report. I will take everything this person has said on board, and I think it is well, it's not out there yet, but I think it is a better product than the one I originally submitted. So I again want to endorse your refereeing process within your own company as something that I feel works very, very well. So I enjoy a very good relationship with Intellect, is the point I want to make. But let's come to Studies in French Cinema. And I thought it would be helpful to talk to you about how we got started, because it's a slightly different story from the one that some of you will know with your own products or your own journals. And if you're at the beginning of doing a journal, maybe some of the things I have to say will be helpful. And then I want you to feel that you can ask me any questions that you want. Now, Masoud mentioned the cover issue, and this was a big struggle for us, because when we started, I was in charge of the cover design, and this is what I came up with. This is the very first volume of Studies in French Cinema. It's actually a very valuable product, because there aren't very many around in-house. But as you can see, it's an early cinema image, which I sourced, and we liked that, and we started to use all sorts of images from our Bill Douglas Centre at Exeter University, which we thought were great, that talked about cinema. Then Robin came to speak to me about the new design, and I was very cross about it. I'll be very honest, I didn't like it at all. And this was not what we had to start with. But we gradually came closer and closer around it, where as long as we had the blue, white and red, I thought, well, you've got to go for an in-house look, I was told, and it's got to happen, so we've got to find a way forward. So I thought, oh, okay. So after quite a lot of battling, we came out with this idea, with volume 1 being blue, volume on the back, volume 2, issue 2, sorry, being issue 1 being blue, issue 2 being white, and issue 3 being red on the back. So we kept the tricolor. This is a constant theme here. So when the new design started to come through last year, by now I was very open to all sorts of suggestions, and one design that came through that I really liked was this. So this is the new design for our journal, and I think it really works. It's very simple. But again, Intellect have moved from letting us be a bit free choicing within 4 years to saying, no, we've got to go for in-house, and you have to accept that we have to find a way to get that right between us, and we did that. And by the time the new design ideas had to come on board for this is our 2010 issue, we found it much faster to work. So I do think that you can have a wonderful relationship with Intellect where there's a meeting, a convergence of ideas. So to the journal. One of the things that struck me during the 90s was how little stuff there was out there within English-speaking journals on French cinema and Francophone cinema. And by that we meant, African, Canadian, Belgian, etc. cinemas. And the difficulty of getting into the major referee journals such as Screen, which are important in the game of the RAE, how difficult it was for us to publish. So I sat down with some friends, Jill Forbes being one of them, who is deceased sadly, and she said, well look, I think it's a great idea, I'll back you, but I don't want to be involved in the work. So I thought, okay. She said, but I do know someone who you could work with quite well, and that was Phil Powery. So right from the beginning we worked in tandem. There were two of us, and that's another thing. If you're doing it on your own, it's very, very hard work. If you're doing it as two, then more ideas can sort of rub up against each other, spark, and create results. But my starting point, and I said this to Phil before he and I decided we could work together, my starting point was twofold. I thought there's something about French cinema that needs to be put right, and that is the areas that are covered. Because it's always the same. If you do look at what was coming out before, it was very much auteur based, very much new wave, a little bit of old stuff and a little bit of new stuff, but very little else. And I thought we have to break the boundaries here and open up the debates around French cinema. So that was a very important driving force in our ethos. And the other thing that was incredibly important to me was to facilitate young scholars. As you all know, when you start out in academia, it is incredibly difficult. I don't know how much more difficult it is now, but certainly in the 90s, it was very, very difficult to get yourself published. And we all know that once you are published, then people start to pay attention to you. All of a sudden, once you're in print, you have worth. So my feeling was we have to support young scholars, get young people to feel they can submit their work, and we will help them. If it's not well written but the idea is good, we will help train them in their writing. And that's something that we've stuck to throughout, and it's I'm very proud of that, because most journals, I'm not talking about Intellect journals, but most other journals will say this is poorly written. No. We will say, this is a great idea, but this needs doing, that needs doing, resubmit, let's have another look at it, and then we'll come back to you again and again until it's right. And that, believe you me, it has helped launch numerous people's careers. I know that because they write to me. So we see ourselves as a fostering journal as well, and I think that's an ethos that will be carried forward. The coverage, we have spoken against received ideas about French cinema, which I think are very important, not least of which the overbearingly boring new wave dominance of the French scenario. We've really put that one out to rest, and we brought new areas in, the 50s, the 70s, areas that have not been talked about, early cinema and so on. We also approach, beyond that, we look at theory, we look at trends, we look at technology. So it's a very broad arena that we invite articles to come into, and we get stuff on digital media now, which makes me feel very modern, although I don't necessarily always understand, but that's what other people do. Right, so that's the first point, the ethos. The second point is, if you're getting started, and again, I may be talking to people who already know this, but it's just it's an important thing to bear in mind. You have to have a strong editorial board. An editorial board that people will say, oh yes, well if they're on the editorial board, of course I'll submit my article. Let's say that you're doing a thing on, I don't know, why don't I choose something random like German cinema. You need to have on your editorial board all the big names in German cinema, so that when you write to someone and say, would you please, or as many big names as you can get, you write to someone like Tom Elzasser, for example. Maybe a lot of people know who Tom is, maybe not, but let's say I wrote to Tom and said, well, would you please submit an article to my new German cinema journal? The first thing he will do is look at the editorial board to make sure that the people who are going to referee his work pass muster. And it's not snobbery, it's not nothing else, it's just practical advice. Have a very strong editorial board and people will say, yes, I will submit. Because that's how you get started. How are you going to get articles in? You've got to write to people and get them to submit. So a very strong editorial board. I think also having an advisory board is good, because then you can get more big names in, because they don't have to do anything but be there, but it helps. And occasionally you call on them. And of course, as much as possible, have an international flavour to that, not just the local UK. Try and be as international as possible, because that again influences people in their desire to submit to your journal. So you've got your journal idea started, you're beginning to solicit articles, but the first year, I don't know if you've had this experience if you're in your first year, the first 1 or 2 years can be very, very difficult, and you can be with not enough articles. Right. So my thinking around that was, okay, I think we can sort that problem if we do the following thing. And I owe a debt of gratitude to Robin here, and I need to sort of come back a little bit on that story. When Robin and I sat down to discuss this journal, he said, yeah, I'm really enthusiastic about it, Susan, and any of you who know Robin will know how enthusiastic he could be. He said, but, and this was the sting in the tail, but you will have to pay for the publication of the journal. These were old days. It doesn't work quite like this now, I realise. Which meant that I had to get at least 100 subscribers to this journal in order to be able to pay the amount for the publication. At this point, my hair nearly fell out, and I thought, oh, I can't possibly do that. And I thought, no, come on, hold on. So Robin said, no, you can do it. What you need to do is form an association, and, why don't you have conferences? Because that way you'll get people to come, and then you get them to join up. So I thought, well, that's quite a good idea. So how we managed to build a bank of articles was, we have had, ever since the beginning of the journal, since 2000, we have had an annual conference. And at that annual conference, where we charged very little for people to come, because the French Institute used to give us a room where we didn't have to pay anything, we used to charge a very nominal fee. We used to hustle to sell membership and subscription to the journal, but we also had a day's worth of some very good papers. So we would cherry pick the best papers and ask these people if they would work them up to article length. And that has been a very, very strong source of our bank of articles. So that's a word of advice, that if you do have the energy to pull on a one-day, you only need a one-day conference, you don't need anything grand, find a place where you can do it for no costs, charge a small amount, because that'll help you do other things, which I'll come to perhaps a bit later if I have time. You do other things with that surplus amount of money, but you also get a good flow of articles coming in. And you can also, by having conferences, make sure you cover areas that you think are important. So, for example, we had a conference on the 50s, we had a conference on genre, we had a conference on 70s, we had a conference on sound, and we had a conference on body. These are just 6 that I choose, or 5 I choose at random, out of which we got at least 3 or 4 extremely good pieces. So, we're never short of articles in our story. We're full now till the year 2011, 2012. We also, of course, receive submissions all the time. And what happens to those is we read them first. We then send them out to and we make a decision there if we think it's going to work. If we think it needs work, we send it back and say this needs work based on this, this and this. Resubmit, and we will send it on to our referees. Goes to the referees. We have a 6-week maximum turnaround. That's key. There are 1 or 2 journals, even within Intellect, who are very, very slow in getting back, and I think that's a flaw. And that needs to, if you know who they are, don't let them do it. Because if you get back to people within 6 weeks, they love you already, provided you're taking their article, of course, if they don't. But you've got a good relationship. And what I do is when I send back and say, thank you very much for your submission, we would expect to get back to you about it within 6 weeks. If you have not heard from me by that time, please send me a reminder. That gives them that idea of agency that you talked about, an open dialogue, so they're not afraid of us. Why should you be afraid of us? We're only trying to help. But it makes them feel they have some kind of authority and authorship over what it is that they've sent us, and they do. And if we have been remiss, we're very apologetic, and we get back ASAP. Now, the other point about the value of the conference is that what it's allowed us to do is to pull together some prizes. This is a good way to get your journal known about, because all of a sudden they see we have a website which we design and look after ourselves at the moment, but on there it says, these are the various prizes. So we have an annual prize for the best undergraduate essay, we have an annual prize for the best master's essay, and we have an annual prize for the best best article published by a PhD candidate. Because we do get PhD stuff that is very, very remarkably strong, as you would expect. So those are 3 prizes that we give annually, and lecturers, etc., submit this work on behalf of their students to us with a bona fide stamp saying this is their work. And the other thing we do is we give travel scholarships to PhD students to go to conferences that are in some way related to French or Francophone cinema. May not be a lot of money, but it's enough to pay their rail fare, for example. And all these things help, and it lodges us in the consciousness of the people who know about us or don't know about us. They find out about us through all these different avenues. So these are little things that you can do in marketing ploys that will help you. Right. The other thing that I would like to raise, and then perhaps we'll move on to see whether there are questions that you want to put to me, is I suppose that I believe that most of the journals that people are involved with now do not require you to recruit members. That's done through Intellect Press itself now, isn't it? But some of the obvious things to do, which help Intellect, I suppose, therefore, sort of looking at pushing it the other way around, is that, or one of the things I don't think that we've done enough of in Studies in French Cinema, so perhaps a flaw, just one, is that we don't hustle enough. We used to at the beginning, the first 5 years, we hustled a lot at conferences, but we've stopped kind of doing that now. And it may be because I'm not in charge of the conference side of things, because I'm quite a hustler really, and my other colleagues aren't. And I need to talk about that as well in a second. But one of the ways that you need to think about the journal is it's your baby as much as it's Intellect. And if you don't put the energy in, it's all very well putting the energy in to get a nice product out there, great articles and stuff, but if nobody's reading it, it's not much use. And because Masood and his outfit are such a strong enforcer and powerful, I don't know, driving energy for us, it seems to me that we need to meet that energy at least halfway and try and help him keep his business strongly afloat, not just afloat. So I think the conference circuit is one where you need to hustle a bit, and I wish that we still did, but we don't do as much of that as in the past. I think another way of helping recruit membership is to have quite a personal relationship with the people who are actually submitting to you. So not just the work that we do with our articles that come in that need work, but also staying in touch with people as the article is going through its process. So to just, you know, let them know where we are with it, in the hopes that these people who have submitted to us will actually eventually take out a membership. And I think we have done, I would say that we get about a 5% return on that endeavour, which is still worthwhile. Because we became, because of all the things that we took on, so we have the journal, the subscriptions, the conference and the web page, gradually things became, to say nothing of the articles coming in, the whole process became quite onerous for just two of us. So I think 4 years ago we decided to take on 2 assistant editors to help us with the work on both the conference side of things and the processing of the articles. And that has been a great relief. And then a second thing that we've done since then to try and up our memberships, not just for us on individual subscriptions, but also for the libraries, which of course immediately affects Intellect Press, was we appointed a colleague to be the representative in North America, so both Canada and the United States, and one for the Antipodes in Australia and New Zealand. And we've asked them to push for library subscriptions and, where possible, at conferences to push for individual subscriptions. And that, again, has brought about a 5% return for us, and I think a little bit more on the library return for Masood. So I suppose I'm saying a global involvement with your journal is very important as editor, just as much as it is on the side of Intellect. Right, so those are the things I wanted to say. I hope they've been clear. I know it said here that I was going to talk just about getting articles and sourcing articles and peer review, but I think I've addressed that a little bit. But if there are other issues that you'd like to raise, this would perhaps be the time for us to do that.